In the endless sea of stars, where countless civilizations danced in the cosmic ballet, the Carey Empire sparkled like a jewel. Their worlds, connected by shimmering hyperspace lanes, formed one of the most advanced societies in the known galaxy. Unlike many other species, the Carey evolved from insectoid ancestors, developing both intelligence and remarkable beauty. Their females grew larger, stronger, and more colorful than the males, naturally leading to a society where women held the reins of power. The crystalline palace of Meridia caught the light of 3 suns, sending rainbow patterns across the capital city below. Inside these gleaming walls, Queen Hei-Yun prepared for another day of ruling her vast empire. Her iridescent wings, folded neatly against her back, shimmered as she moved through the morning light. Though young for a queen at just 30 cycles, she had already proven herself a master of politics and strategy. News of the Human Cultural Exchange Program reached her private chambers through her morning reports. The humans, a relatively new species to join the Galactic Union, had been making waves throughout known space. Their quick advancement from planetary civilization to spacefaring race had caught everyone's attention. Unlike the careful, measured progress of most species, humans seemed to leap forward in bursts of innovation. Lieutenant Ta-Min Lee stood at attention in the Earth Embassy on Meridia, his dress uniform perfectly pressed. The selection process for the exchange program had been grueling, but his unique combination of skills made him stand out. His years studying alien cultures, combined with military discipline and diplomatic training, painted him as the perfect bridge between worlds. "You understand the implications of this posting?" Admiral Chen asked, pacing before him. "The Carey treat their males differently than we do. You'll be entering their service system." "I understand, sir," Ta-Min replied, his voice steady. "That's precisely why I volunteered. Someone needs to understand their society from the inside." The Royal Auction House of Meridia served as more than just a place of commerce. Its soaring crystal domes and floating platforms hosted the most elite of Carey society. Today, the usual buzz of activity reached new heights as nobles and merchants gathered to witness something unprecedented: the first human to enter the service system. Queen Hei-Yun's arrival silenced the chattering crowds. She moved with natural grace, her wings catching the light. 4 royal guards flanked her, their armor gleaming. The queen's deep purple coloring, rare among her people, marked her as part of the royal bloodline. Ta-Min stood with other potential servants, noting how different he looked among the Carey males. Where they were slight and pale, with small vestigial wings, he stood tall and solid. Their movements were quiet and deferential, while his military bearing showed even in stillness. The Queen's advisors presented her with files on each candidate. Most contained standard information, family histories, skills, and genetic compatibility ratings for those being considered for more intimate roles. Ta-Min's files stood out, not just for his alien origin, but for the depth of his qualifications. "Interesting," Hei-Yun murmured, her antennae twitching slightly as she read. "Military training, Sino-anthropology, diplomatic corps. This human has quite the background." Her chief advisor, Lady Minji, leaned closer. "Your Majesty, selecting the human would be unprecedented. The nobles are already nervous about their presence in the capital." "Change makes everyone nervous," Hei-Yun replied, still studying the file. "But those who don't adapt die. Isn't that what our ancestors learned when they first left their hives for the stars?" The Queen moved down the line, speaking briefly with each candidate. When she reached Ta-Min, she paused longer than with the others. "You've studied our culture extensively," she noted. "Yes, Your Majesty," he replied in perfect Carey formal language. "I believe understanding leads to respect, and respect to harmony." Hei-Yun's antennae twitched again, this time in pleasure at his proper use of traditional phrasing. She circled him once, noting his composed stance and clear gaze. Unlike the Carey males, who kept their eyes downcast, Ta-Min looked ahead, showing respect without submission. The assembled nobles watched with growing interest. Some whispered behind delicate fans, while others shifted nervously. The Queen's choice of personal servants often indicated future political directions. "I will take this one," Hei-yun announced, her wings spreading slightly in a gesture of decision. The artificial light caught the translucent membranes, creating a stunning display of color that reflected her royal status. The announcement sent ripples through the crowd. A human in the royal household. The implications would echo through every level of society. Some nobles nodded in approval at their queen's progressive choice, while others barely hid their disapproval. Tai Min bowed deeply, matching the exact angle of respect due to a queen. As he straightened, he caught a glimpse of approval in Hei-yun's compound eyes. His first test, passing as a knowledgeable student of their culture, had succeeded. The formal purchase proceeded quickly. Credits transferred, contracts signed, and within hours, Tai Min found himself being led through the crystal corridors of the palace. His guide, a senior servant named Jun-ho, explained the complex daily schedules and protocols he would need to learn. As night fell over Meridia, 3 moons rose to join the setting suns. In his new quarters, more comfortable than he'd expected, Tai Min looked out at the alien sky. Somewhere up there, Earth sparkled like any other star. He touched the silver band now circling his wrist, marking him as royal property, and smiled. His real mission, understanding the carry from within, was just beginning. In her private chambers, Queen Hei-yun reviewed the day's decisions with Lady Minji. "The human will either be our greatest asset or our biggest mistake," Minji observed. "Life itself is an experiment," Hei-yun replied, using an old Carrie proverb. "And those who never try new things are doomed to stay in their old hive." She turned to watch the moons rise, her wings shimmering with possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she felt certain she had made the right choice. Life in the Crystal Palace followed patterns as intricate as the architecture itself. Tai Min spent his first weeks learning the complex dance of service that kept the royal household running smoothly. Every gesture, every word, and even the direction one walked through certain corridors had meaning in Carrie culture. The silver band around his wrist marked him as a male servant, though his human height and build set him apart from the shorter, more delicate Carrie males. Female servants wore bands of gold, marking their higher status, while the noble classes wore no bands at all. Their status showed in the patterns of their wing colors and the complexity of their antennae decorations. Each morning began with the greeting of suns, where servants lined the main hall as Queen Hei-yun made her way to the morning council. Tai Min learned to bow at exactly the right moment, neither too early, which would seem eager, nor too late, which would show disrespect. "You adapt quickly," noted Jun-ho, his mentor among the servants. "Most new arrivals take months to learn the proper timing." Tai Min's military training helped him maintain perfect posture as he replied, "The patterns remind me of martial arts forms. Everything flows from one movement to the next." His duties varied from day to day. Sometimes he served in the library, organizing ancient scrolls and digital records. Other times he attended the Queen during diplomatic meetings, standing silently against the wall while taking mental notes of everything he observed. The other servants gradually grew used to his presence, though their curiosity remained. During meal breaks, they would ask him questions about Earth and human customs. Tai Min answered carefully, always aware that his role as cultural ambassador was just as important as his official duties. "Is it true that human males can become leaders?" one young servant asked during lunch. "Yes," Tai Min replied. "In our culture, leadership roles are open to all genders." This always caused much discussion among the Carrie, who found the concept both fascinating and slightly alarming. Their society had evolved from hive structures where females naturally took charge, and the idea of male leadership seemed as strange to them as their system might seem to humans. Queen Hei-yun often requested Tai Min's presence during diplomatic functions. His height and distinctive appearance made him useful for intimidating difficult visitors, while his understanding of multiple cultures helped him spot subtle cues that others might miss. During one such reception, hosting delegates from the Outer Rim worlds, Min stood at his usual post near the Queen's table. The evening progressed smoothly until he noticed something unusual about the Queen's drinking crystal. The Carey used specially grown crystals for their drinking vessels, each one attuned to detect certain toxins. As Yun raised her glass, Min caught the faintest shift in color, a slight purple tinge that shouldn't have been there. Without breaking his stance or showing any sign of alarm, he remembered his briefing about Carey protocols. Direct intervention would cause embarrassment, and possibly a diplomatic incident. He needed a more subtle approach. "Your Majesty," he said, timing his words perfectly between conversations, "would you honor us by allowing me to demonstrate a human custom? We believe that drinks should be refreshed at precise intervals to maintain their perfect temperature." Yun's antennae twitched slightly, a sign of curiosity that only those who knew her well would recognize. "Please proceed," she said. Min moved smoothly, replacing not just the Queen's drink, but all the drinks at the table. He made it seem like an elaborate ceremony, adding small flourishes that kept the delegates entertained while ensuring no one could track which glass went where. The rest of the evening passed without incident, though Min noticed several delegates looking uncomfortable. His actions had not gone unnoticed by those who needed to notice. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Queen Yun summoned him to her private study. The room, with its walls of living crystal that responded to her moods, glowed with a soft blue light. "You saw the poison, didn't you?" she asked directly, her wings shifting with interest. "Yes, Your Majesty," Min replied honestly. The liquid changed color slightly when it contacted the crystal. Most wouldn't have noticed. Even fewer would have handled it so diplomatically. She moved to the window, looking out over the nighttime city. "Tell me, how did you know about the crystal's reaction to that particular toxin?" "I studied the palace's security protocols extensively before coming here," he answered. "The crystal detection system is quite ingenious." Yun turned back to him, her compound eyes reflecting the room's blue glow. "You continue to surprise me, Min. Most see a servant, but I see someone who prepares thoroughly and observes carefully. I serve as I was trained, Your Majesty." "Indeed." She paused, her antennae moving in a pattern that indicated deep thought. "From now on, you will attend all diplomatic functions. Your eyes see things others miss." Min bowed deeply, recognizing both the honor and the responsibility of the assignment. As he straightened, he caught a glimpse of something in the Queen's expression, a look that suggested she had learned something valuable about him, just as he was learning about her. As he walked back to his quarters that night, Min reflected on how the evening's events would affect his position in the palace. He had proven his worth, but also shown himself to be more observant than many might be comfortable with. In the complex world of Carey politics, being useful could be just as dangerous as being useless. The moons cast 3 different colors through his window, reminding him that on this world, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. He touched his silver band and smiled slightly. Sometimes the best way to learn about a culture was to protect it, even from itself. The attempted poisoning at the diplomatic reception opened new doors for Min within the palace structure. While maintaining his role as a servant, he began working closely with the royal guard, reviewing security protocols and past incidents. His military background proved invaluable as patterns emerged from seemingly random events. Late one night, while studying security logs in the guard's command center, Min noticed something odd. The palace had experienced several minor breaches over the past year, each dismissed as isolated incidents. But when he mapped them against the palace's layout, a clear pattern emerged. "Look here," he showed Captain Ji-hyun, leader of the Queen's personal guard. "These breaches aren't random. They're testing responses, learning the weak points in our security." Ji-hyun's antennae twitched with concern as she studied the pattern. "Someone's preparing for something bigger," she agreed. "But our traditional defense formations have served us for generations." "With respect, Captain, traditions need to adapt when threats change," Min suggested. On Earth, we learn to combine different fighting styles to create more effective defenses. The captain considered this, her wing edges shimmering with interest. Show me, she decided. Over the next few weeks, Tai Min began training sessions with select members of the Royal Guard. He taught them human martial arts techniques that complemented their natural carry abilities. Their lighter bodies and quick movements matched well with human throws and joint locks. Queen He-yun often observed these training sessions from her private balcony. She watched as her guards learned to use their opponent's strength against them, just as Tai Min had done with the poison incident. The human's teaching style intrigued her, firm but respectful, always acknowledging carry traditions while introducing new ideas. During one such session, she summoned Ta Min to her study. The room had become a familiar place to him, its living crystal walls shifting with subtle colors that reflected the queen's moods. "Tell me about your homeland on Earth," she requested, settling near the window. "Your fighting techniques speak of a culture that understands balance." Tai Min began sharing stories of Korean history, speaking of how his ancestors had defended their peninsula for thousands of years. He told her about the concept of yin and yang, the balance between opposing forces that created harmony. "Your people value harmony between opposite forces," she noted, her wings shifting thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's what our empire needs." Their conversations became more frequent. The queen would summon him in the evenings, asking about Earth's various cultures and traditions. Tai Min spoke of how different human nations learned to work together despite their differences, sharing technologies and ideas while maintaining their unique identities. One evening, their discussion was interrupted by alarms. The palace's crystal walls flashed red as security alerts triggered throughout the complex. Tai Min immediately moved to protect the queen, his training taking over. The pattern, he realized. They're making their move. Multiple breaches had occurred simultaneously, overwhelming the traditional defense formations. But the guards Tai Min had trained responded differently, using their new techniques to counter the attackers. In the chaos, 3 assassins reached the queen's study. They found He-yun standing calmly, her wings spread in royal authority, with Ta Min positioned protectively beside her. What followed demonstrated the perfect blend of carry and human combat styles. Ta Min moved with practiced precision, using the attackers' momentum against them, while the queen's own defensive capabilities proved far greater than the assassins expected. Together, they held off the attack until Captain Ji-hyun arrived with reinforcements. In the aftermath, as palace security rounded up the surviving attackers, Queen He-yun turned to Ta Min. "You knew this was coming," she stated. "I suspected, Your Majesty. The previous breaches were too organized to be random. Yet you chose to prepare us quietly, without causing alarm." Her antennae moved in a pattern indicating deep approval. "You understand our ways better than many born to them." The incident marked a turning point in palace life. The queen's trust in Ta Min grew, and his position evolved beyond that of a simple servant. While he still wore the silver band, his role became more that of an advisor on security and cultural matters. The surviving assassin's interrogation revealed a plot by conservative nobles who feared the queen's progressive policies. They had not counted on the combination of traditional carry strength and innovative human techniques. As changes swept through the palace security systems, Ta Min continued his evening discussions with the queen. They spoke of finding balance between tradition and progress, between strength and flexibility. In these quiet moments, both felt the barriers of their different species beginning to fade, replaced by a deeper understanding. "Your world seems to embrace change more easily than ours," He-yun observed one evening. "Change is constant, Your Majesty," Ta Min replied. "The trick is to guide it rather than fight it." She looked at him then, her compound eyes reflecting the crystal's shifting colors. "Like you've guided us, perhaps." Tai Min bowed slightly, acknowledging both the compliment and the responsibility it carried. In the distance, the 3 moons of Meridia rose, casting their mixed light over the city. Like the blended fighting styles now protecting the palace, Their different colors created something new and beautiful together. Tension filled the Royal Council chamber as reports arrived from the border regions. 3 neighboring star systems had begun moving warships into position, each claiming exclusive rights to newly discovered trade routes. The Carey Empire stood at the brink of a conflict that could destabilize the entire sector. Tan Min stood at his usual post behind Queen He-yun's throne, listening as advisors presented increasingly dire scenarios. Trade was the lifeblood of the empire, and these new routes through stable wormholes could cut transport times in half. The Vex Alliance threatens to blockade our outer colonies, one minister reported, her antennae drooping with worry. The Meridian Cluster promises retaliation if we don't support their claims. Queen He-yun sat silently, her wings held perfectly still in the way Tan Min had learned meant she was deeply troubled. The traditional solution would be a show of force, but that would certainly lead to war. During a brief recess, the Queen noticed Tan Min's thoughtful expression. "You have something to say," she stated rather than asked. "Your Majesty, we faced similar challenges on Earth when automated shipping lanes were first established," he explained. "Perhaps the solution lies not in choosing sides, but in removing the need for sides altogether." Intrigued, He-yun invited him to present his idea to the council. Standing before the gathered ministers, Tan Min outlined his proposal for neutral trade zones managed by artificial intelligence. The AI would control traffic flow, maintain security, and ensure fair access for all parties, he explained. No single empire would have control, but all would benefit from faster, safer trade. The council chamber buzzed with discussion. It was an elegant solution that would allow everyone to save face while actually improving their situation. Queen He-yun watched her ministers' reactions carefully, noting how Tan Min had presented the idea in terms that appealed to Carey sensibilities. But even as the trade crisis moved toward resolution, another problem emerged. Classified information about the Empire's defensive capabilities had begun reaching their rivals. The leaks seemed random at first, until Tan Min noticed they coincided with solar flares from Meridia's 3 suns. "The timing is too perfect," he told Captain Ji-hyun while reviewing security logs. "Someone's using the solar interference to mask transmissions." Working together, they began tracking energy patterns during flare events. Tan Min's human perspective proved valuable. Where Carey minds excelled at processing multiple inputs simultaneously, his linear thinking helped identify subtle sequences. Late one night, while most of the palace slept, Tan Min discovered an unusual power fluctuation in an abandoned section of the palace's lower levels. The pattern matched quantum communication signatures he'd studied in his military training. "Someone's built a hidden network," he revealed to Queen He-yun in a private meeting. "They're using old maintenance tunnels to house the equipment, and the solar flares provide perfect cover for transmissions." The Queen's wings shifted with concern. These tunnels were sealed generations ago. Few even remember they exist. "Which makes them perfect for hiding secrets," Tan Min noted. "With your permission, I'd like to set a trap." He-yun watched him work over the next few days, impressed by his methodical approach. Where her people tended to search for complex solutions, Tan Min often found surprisingly simple answers that proved more effective. He modified standard security sensors to detect quantum fluctuations, placing them strategically throughout the lower levels. Then he waited, tracking the pattern of solar flares and station activities. "The next major flare occurs tomorrow at mid-rotation," he told the Queen's personal guard. "That's when they'll try to transmit." Sure enough, when the sun's energy peaked, the sensors detected activity in the tunnels. A small team of guards, led by Tan Min, caught 3 royal advisors in the act of transmitting classified data. The discovery sent shockwaves through the palace. The advisors had been using ancient technology left over from previous dynasties, combining it with modern quantum communications in ways no one had thought possible. "You see connections others miss," Queen He-yun told Tan Min afterward, as they stood watching the 3 suns set. "Your mind works differently from ours, finding order in what we perceive as randomness." Different perspectives can be valuable, he replied carefully, aware of how their relationship had evolved from owner and property to something closer to equals. Like the trade zone solution, sometimes the best answer comes from combining different ways of thinking. He-Yun's wings shimmered in the fading light, displaying colors that Ta-Min had learned indicated deep satisfaction. Indeed, perhaps that is why the universe brought our species together. As night fell over the Crystal Palace, Ta-Min reflected on how far he had come from his initial role as a simple servant. The silver band still circled his wrist, but it had become more symbol than restraint. Through his actions, he had proven that true value transcended traditional hierarchies. The grand alignment of Meridia's three suns approached, casting unusual patterns of light through the palace's crystal walls. This rare astronomical event, occurring once every 15 years, held deep cultural significance for the Carrie. According to ancient laws, it marked the deadline for an unmarried queen to choose her mate. News of the upcoming alignment filled the palace with nervous energy. Noble families from across the empire began arriving, each presenting their most eligible males. The traditional courtship rituals would last for weeks, leading up to the final selection before the alignment. Queen He-Yun watched from her throne as each candidate performed the ritual displays. Carrie males spread their smaller wings in carefully choreographed patterns, their colors shifting to show their bloodlines and accomplishments. Yet she found her attention repeatedly drawn to where Ta-Min stood quietly at his post. "Your Majesty seems distracted," observed Lady Yuna, her most trusted advisor. The older Carrie had served 3 queens and knew the signs of a troubled mind. "These displays feel hollow," He-Yun admitted privately. "They show breeding and training, but reveal nothing of character or intelligence." Each evening after the formal presentations, He-Yun would retire to her study. More often than not, she would summon Ta-Min to discuss the day's events. Their conversations had become a comfort, a place where she could speak freely without the weight of ceremony. "Tell me," she asked one night, "how do humans choose their mates?" Ta-Min considered carefully before answering. "We look for compatibility in mind and spirit, Your Majesty. Shared values, mutual respect, and genuine connection matter more than status." "That sounds wiser than our tradition of genetic matching and political alliances," she mused, her wings shifting in patterns that showed deep thought. As the days passed, rumors began spreading through the palace. Sharp-eyed nobles noticed how the queen's colors brightened when her human servant was near. They saw how she valued his counsel above many traditional advisors. The situation came to a head during a council meeting discussing the upcoming selection. One minister dared to voice what others had only whispered. "Your Majesty seems reluctant to consider any of the noble candidates." "I must choose what is best for the empire," He-Yun replied diplomatically. "The alignment approaches, and my decision will affect generations to come." Lady Yuna, who had been studying ancient legal texts, spoke up. "The law specifies noble blood," she noted carefully. "It doesn't specify Carrie blood." The chamber erupted in shocked buzzing. The implication was clear to everyone. Some ministers displayed colors of outrage, while others showed intrigued patterns in their wing movements. Ta-Min maintained his professional composure throughout the debate, though his heart raced at the implications. He had long since acknowledged his growing feelings for the queen, but had buried them deep beneath his sense of duty. "A human consort? Impossible," one minister exclaimed. "It goes against all tradition." "Tradition must serve the empire, not strangle it," Lady Yuma countered. "We've already seen the benefits of combining human and Carrie perspectives." The debate spread beyond the council chamber. Throughout the palace, nobles and servants alike discussed the possibility. Some pointed to Ta-Min's proven loyalty and accomplishments. Others warned of diluting the royal bloodline. Queen He-Yun watched the chaos with outward calm, though those who knew her well could see the conflict in her color patterns. The choice before her was unprecedented: maintain tradition with a conventional match, or take a bold step that could transform the empire. During this time, Ta-Min found his position increasingly complicated. Noble males viewed him with open hostility, while others treated him with newfound deference. Through it all, he maintained his duties with steady professionalism. "You haven't spoken your thoughts on this matter," He-Yun said to him one evening, as they watched the three sons beginning their approach to alignment. "It would not be appropriate for me to influence such an important decision, Your Majesty," he replied carefully. Her wings shifted in a pattern he had never seen before. "Even now, you think of duty first. Perhaps that is why." She left the thought unfinished, but her colors spoke volumes. As the alignment drew closer, the pressure for a decision mounted. Traditional candidates continued their displays with increased desperation, while political factions formed around the possibility of a human consort. Lady Yuna worked tirelessly, building legal arguments and gathering support among influential nobles. "The empire is changing," she reminded the queen. "Perhaps it needs a change in its ruling partnership as well." Through it all, Tai-Min continued his duties, now carrying the additional weight of being the center of the court's attention. His every interaction with the queen was scrutinized, yet he never let it affect his service or his judgment. The three sons drew closer to their rare alignment, their combined light creating ever more complex patterns through the palace crystals. Soon, a decision would have to be made that would affect not just the queen and her potential consort, but the future of the entire empire. The palace crystals pulsed with energy as Queen He-Yun summoned the High Council for an emergency session. The combined light of the nearly aligned suns filled the grand chamber, creating shadows that danced across the gathered nobles' wings. Tai-Min stood at his usual post, watching as council members filed in. Their colors showed a mix of anticipation and concern. Everyone knew this meeting would be historic, though none knew exactly what the queen planned to announce. "Our empire stands at a crossroads," He-Yun began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "For generations, we have prided ourselves on our ability to adapt and grow. It is what lifted us from our first hives to the stars themselves." She paused, letting her words sink in. Her wings spread gradually, displaying royal colors that commanded absolute attention. Yet now, when faced with change, some would have us cling to tradition like larvae to their first molt. They fear what is different, what is new. Her gaze swept the chamber. "This fear has already cost us dearly." The queen gestured to Lady Yuna, who activated a holographic display. It showed evidence from the recently uncovered quantum communication network, proof that traditionalist factions have been actively working to undermine relations with other species, particularly humans. "These conspirators believed they were protecting our way of life," He-Yun continued. "Instead, they nearly brought us to war. They would have cost us valuable trade routes, technological advances, and cultural exchanges." Murmurs spread through the council as more details of the conspiracy were revealed. Several prominent noble families were implicated, their representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "But in this crisis, who helped save us?" The queen's colors brightened. "A human. One who came to us as a servant, but proved himself more noble in action than many born to privilege." Tai-Min maintained his composure as all eyes turned to him. He had faced scrutiny before, but never quite like this. "Our empire's strength lies in adaptation," He-Yun declared. "Humans have proven themselves worthy allies. Why not worthy mates?" The chamber erupted in discussion. Some nobles displayed colors of support, while others showed patterns of strong disagreement. Through it all, the queen stood calmly, her decision evident in every aspect of her bearing. Just then, alarms blared through the palace. Emergency lights pulsed as reports came in of critical problems in the power core. The palace's main reactor was showing signs of imminent meltdown. Without hesitation, Tai-Min rushed to the engineering level. His time studying palace systems let him quickly assess the situation. Someone had sabotaged the cooling systems, using the council meeting as cover. "The backup controls are locked out," the chief engineer reported, his wings showing panic patterns. "We can't shut it down remotely." Tai-Min examined the systems. "The manual override still works, but it's in the hot zone. Radiation levels are already dangerous. Too high for Carrie physiology, the engineer confirmed. We'd never survive the exposure, but human biology might handle it long enough. Tan-Min said, already moving toward the sealed chamber. Get everyone to safety. I'll handle this. The next few minutes tested every bit of Tan-Min's training and knowledge. Fighting through increasing radiation levels, he worked to manually realign the cooling systems. His hand stayed steady even as alarms blared around him. In the council chamber above, Queen He-Yun refused to evacuate, watching the emergency feeds with unwavering focus. The nobles saw their queen standing firm, her faith in Tan-Min absolute. Finally, the reactor readings began to stabilize. Tan-Min emerged from the hot zone, immediately receiving medical attention. Though weakened, he had prevented a disaster that could have destroyed much of the capital city. When he returned to the council chamber several hours later, cleared by medical staff, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Even his strongest critics could not deny his willingness to risk his life for the Empire. Today we have seen the difference between noble blood and noble heart. Queen He-Yun addressed the council. Those who claim to protect our traditions through sabotage and fear show themselves unworthy of the very nobility they claim to defend. She descended from her throne to stand beside Tan-Min. While others plotted our destruction, this man, this human, has repeatedly proven his worth through action, intelligence, and self-sacrifice. Lady Yuna stepped forward, holding ancient scrolls. The earliest laws of our people speak not of blood purity, but of the qualities a royal consort must possess: wisdom, courage, and dedication to the Empire's welfare. The council chamber grew quiet as the implications became clear. Tradition was important, but it had to serve the Empire's needs, not restrict its growth. Through his actions, Tan-Min had demonstrated every quality their laws required, regardless of his species. The suns align in 3 days, Queen He-Yun announced. By then, I will have chosen a mate who will help lead our empire into a new age of prosperity and understanding. I trust there will be no further attempts to prevent this. Her words carried both promise and warning. The failed reactor sabotage had exposed the desperate measures of the traditional faction, destroying their credibility in the process. As the council session ended, Tan-Min noticed a subtle change in how the nobles regarded him. Their colors showed respect, even from those who had opposed him before. He had earned his place not through birth or tradition, but through demonstrating the very qualities their society most valued. The three sons continued their approach to alignment, their combined light creating ever more complex patterns through the palace crystals. Change was coming to the Carrie Empire, as inevitable as the celestial dance above them. The grand alignment of the three suns bathed Meridia in golden light as the palace prepared for an unprecedented ceremony. The ancient throne room had been transformed, its crystal walls reflecting a harmonious blend of Carrie and human decorative elements. Traditional Carrie silk banners hung alongside Korean tapestries, their colors complementing each other in ways no one had imagined possible. Queen He-Yun stood before her mirror, her wings shimmering with rarely seen patterns of nervous excitement. Her attendants had woven precious metals and crystals into her wing membranes, creating designs that told the story of her reign, including the human who had changed everything. In another part of the palace, Tan-Min prepared in his own way. He wore a modern hanbok, specially designed to honor his Korean heritage, while incorporating Carrie symbolic elements. The silver band that had once marked him as a servant now carried royal engravings, transforming it from a symbol of service to one of partnership. "Are you ready?" Lady Yuna asked, entering his chamber. Her colors showed warm approval as she inspected his appearance. "As ready as one can be to make history," he replied with a slight smile. The ceremony began as the three suns reached their perfect alignment, casting triple shadows across the throne room floor. Nobles from across the empire filled the chamber, their wings creating a stunning display of color and light. Human diplomats stood among them, representing Earth and its colonies. Queen He-Yun entered first, following ancient Carrie tradition. Her appearance drew gasps of appreciation. She had chosen to display colors that merged traditional royal patterns with subtle elements of Earth's natural beauty. The result was breathtaking. Ta Min entered from the opposite side, walking with the dignity and grace that had earned him respect throughout the palace. The traditional Korean music playing in the background merged seamlessly with the harmonic vibrations Carrie used in their ceremonies. They met in the center of the chamber, beneath the focused light of the three aligned suns. Hae-yeon spoke first, breaking with tradition by speaking in both Carrie and Korean languages. "Before our assembled peoples, I choose you," she declared, her wings spreading to their full span. "Not for political advantage or genetic matching, but for the strength of your character, the wisdom of your mind, and the nobility of your heart." The queen then performed a modern version of the traditional Carrie mating display, her wings creating patterns that told their shared story. From his arrival as a servant to their current moment, the display incorporated elements of Korean dance, creating something entirely new and beautiful. Ta Min responded by performing the Korean tea ceremony, modified to use Carrie crystal cups. Each movement carried meaning in both cultures, showing respect for tradition while embracing change. "I accept your choice," he answered in both languages. "I pledge my life to you and to the Empire, bringing the best of both our peoples together." Lady Yuna stepped forward, presenting the ancient scrolls that had helped make this moment possible. "The laws of our ancestors spoke of qualities rather than species," she reminded the assembled crowd. "Today we honor their wisdom by recognizing that nobility comes from actions, not birth." The ceremony continued with the traditional Carrie silk weaving, where both participants helped create a tapestry symbolizing their union. Ta Min and Hae-yeon worked together, their movements synchronized, creating a pattern that represented both their cultures. As they completed the final rituals, the three suns began their slow separation. The timing was perfect, their union blessed by the celestial alignment that had once served as a deadline, but now marked a beginning. The celebration that followed was as unique as the ceremony itself. Traditional Carrie honey wine was served alongside Korean soju. Dancers from both species performed together, creating new forms that captured the beauty of both worlds. Later, in a quiet moment away from the festivities, Ha-yeon and Ta-min stood watching the three suns begin their long journey apart. "You've changed our empire forever," she said softly. "We've changed it together," he corrected, "and this is just the beginning." Their union represented more than a marriage. It was a bridge between species, a promise of what could be achieved through understanding and respect. Already, other human Carrie couples among the common people were stepping forward, encouraged by their example. The news spread across the galaxy. The Carrie Empire had embraced change without losing its identity. Their story became a symbol of hope for other species, proving that difference could become strength when approached with an open heart and mind. As night fell over Meridia, the celebration continued under the light of three moons. In the palace gardens, humans and Carrie mingled freely, sharing stories and dreams. The future stretched before them like the star-filled sky, vast, unknown, but full of possibility. Together, they had proven that love could indeed transcend the boundaries of species, tradition, and space itself. Their story would be told for generations, inspiring others to look beyond the surface and find the common heart that beats in all sentient beings. This tale of courage, wisdom, and love marked not an ending, but a beginning, the dawn of a new age where the stars themselves were no longer barriers, but bridges to understanding. The combined light of Meridia's three moons illuminated the palace, casting a gentle glow over the celebration of unity, hope, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead.